Hola mis amigos! Today I'm doing a dual book review with Les on a book that we received for review from the author. That book is Starfall by W.A. Fulkerson. Now when I say dual book review, I mean I'll talk first, give my opinion, and then stay tuned and you can see Les's portion following mine. Starfall is a fantasy book that I would say is aimed towards a young adult audience. It follows twin brothers Malleus and Deucasis, who grow up as slaves on a plantation of a creature called a flare. This is fantasy in the sense that he has created an entirely new universe. So it's very impressive, all of the creatures and the lands that he has come up with, but it also proves to be sort of confusing in the beginning because of course you have to establish what's going on. In this world, everyone has a star that appears in the sky that correlates with their birth, and if that star ever falls down from the sky, the person it corresponds to can go find the star and they actually sort of get special powers. You're called ungifted if you don't have your star, but if you do get your star, you can choose to become sort of a otherworldly creature. It's part of this fantasy world, and then you can choose where you want to go and you don't have to stay and be stuck as a slave or in the old life that you have. Malleus and Deucasis, of course, witness their stars falling and manage to seek them out. However, when they get to their stars, obviously things don't go as planned and the story takes a sharp turn for the unexpected, and this was the first part of the book that really shocked me, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. I really liked the fact that the plot was pretty unpredictable. I thought in the beginning that I knew where it was going and I was kind of like, all right, well, this will be, you know, pretty typical for a fantasy novel. However, once they reached their stars, everything just sort of changed from that point, and it was much more engaging because I didn't really know what was going to happen. I thought I had it figured out. However, there are two things that I really had a problem with. The first is the writing style, in the sense that you spend your time following Deucasis and Malleus around. They were slaves. The only reason they know how to read is because their father taught them from one book that they managed to have in their house, yet some of the vocabulary that they use is extremely fancy for somebody who really doesn't know that much, and it also jumps back and forth between being very in-depth and loaded with heavy words, and then all of a sudden it jumps back to being really plain, and it just sort of gets jerky and confusing, and I just didn't like it very much, and I found it unrealistic that slaves would be able to talk so fancily. The other issue I had was the romance in this book. Deucasis has a friend named Rose who he's always kind of liked, and when the whole thing with the stars goes down, Rose comes into the story more. It is established in the beginning that these guys have known each other for a long time, and Deucasis has had a crush on her for a long time, but I just found that the romance moved way too quickly. It wasn't as bad as if they had never met each other, but I just wasn't behind it the way I wanted to be. I just didn't feel it the way I wanted to. Overall, I'd give this book a 3 out of 5 stars. I recommend it for anybody who's looking for a good fantasy story, something really different that you've never read before. There also is a little bit of a warning with this. It ends on a cliffhanger. All of the stuff that is introduced in the story, basically none of it gets resolved. So if you want to feel complete, you're gonna have to get the other book. It isn't out yet, but you're gonna have to get the follow-up if you want to feel like the story has come to any sort of conclusion, because it really does, and it ends sort of just bam. So yeah, so those are my thoughts on the book. Feel free to stick around to see Les's, and I'll see you guys later.
Aw, you stuck around. Hi, my turn. So as you can see, I have moved once again, which explains the plain white wall behind me, but I also reviewed Starfall by W.A. Fulkerson, and a lot of my feelings were very similar to Beck's. I know she already gave you the rundown of the novel, so I'm going to jump in and say that I found this story to be intriguing, but not compelling. This, to me, was a blend between Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander and The Avengers, actually. It had some seriously powerful sort of creatures in there, and it's definitely a whole new mythology beginning, like it says on the back. I believe the last line is, "A new mythology begins now," and W.A. Fulkerson has definitely done a really good job of creating a new land and a new world for his characters to live in. So I was intrigued by that, but I wasn't really compelled by the story until toward the end, like the last 4 or 5 chapters were where it really started to pick up and make me believe that I wanted to read the next book. That being said, should the next one become available at my local library, I will most certainly would be inclined to read it. It does end on a cliffhanger, like Bex told you, and what a cliffhanger it is. Nothing gets resolved, which is a little bit infuriating, but that's how you create a sequel. I found there to be a lot of plot twists. Like Bex also said, you sort of feel like you know how this book is going to go, and then all of a sudden different things hit you at different points in the story, and you realize that you were totally wrong, and that the book is just going to take a completely different turn. I thought those were all very successful uses of plot, because sometimes when you make dramatic changes to a seemingly progressive plot, it can go horribly awry, but no, this book does it really well. However, the problem I had with it was some of the colloquial language. Bex touched on their impressive vocabulary, being slaves and only having learned from one book, but my problem was the use of the words like cool and dude. I believe dude is in there, I could be wrong. But they just, for a mythological society, they seem to be using a lot of language which was common to the 21st century, which is not the time they're living in. So I found that to be a little bit jarring, that they were speaking with today's words rather than words of their own time. And I understand the boredom that comes with old-fashioned language, but at the same time I think it's really essential that if you're going to set something in a past mythological era, that you make the language appropriate to the time that the book is set. Overall, I thought the characters were rather interesting. It's nice to have it from two different points of view. There are some great auxiliary characters, and I give the book 3.5 out of 5 stars. Hope you all are having lovely weeks and lovely days. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.